November 1923, Paris. A committee of financial experts gathered around a table with one mandate: fix Germany's debt, or Europe collapses again. 4 years after the Great War had ended, the continent was still tearing itself apart over who would pay for it. The man they handed the problem to was not a diplomat, not a general. He was a banker from Chicago, who had never set foot in Germany. His name was Charles Dawes, and his plan would win a Nobel Peace Prize. But here is what they did not give him the prize for. The same financial architecture he designed to stabilize Germany built the conditions that made Adolf Hitler's rise not just possible, but mathematically inevitable. This is not a conspiracy. This is accounting. To understand how a peace plan became a war engine, you have to follow the money, and the money, in 1924, was flowing in one direction, from New York to Berlin. By the end of 1923, Germany was in freefall. The Versailles Treaty had imposed reparations of 132 billion gold marks on Germany in 1921, to be paid to France, Britain, and Belgium. For a war that had killed 17 million people, Germany could not pay. It had tried. It had printed money. By November 1923, $1 American bought 4 trillion German marks, wheelbarrows of paper, children building blocks from banknotes. The currency had ceased to function as currency. France and Belgium did not wait. They marched soldiers into the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland, January 1923. The goal was to seize coal and steel in place of cash. Germany responded with passive resistance. Workers went on strike, factories shut down, production stopped, inflation accelerated. The French occupation lasted 8 months. It cost France more to run than it collected in reparations, and it left Germany's economy worse than before. Europe was tearing itself apart over a debt that nobody could actually pay. This is when Dawes entered. His committee's solution had 3 parts. First, restructure Germany's reparation payments on a sliding scale, starting at 1 billion gold marks in year 1, rising to 2.5 billion by 1928, manageable. Graduated rational. Second, reorganize the German central bank, the Reichsbank, under international supervision. Remove it from political control. Place it under a board that included foreign nationals. Make it answerable to creditors, not to the German government. Third, and this is the part that requires attention, issue a loan, 800 million marks, to be raised in the international capital markets, primarily in the United States. J.P. Morgan and Company floated the loan on the American market. It was oversubscribed within hours. American investors, pension funds, insurance companies, private banks rushed to buy German bonds at 7% interest. Half the total amount came from the United States. J.P. Morgan contributed the largest single tranche of any participating institution. Before we continue, if you already knew this part of the story, drop a £sign in the comments. I want to know how many of you have already been down this rabbit hole. The loan was the ignition. Between 1924 and 1929, approximately 30 billion marks in foreign loans flowed into Germany. Most of it from the United States, most of it channeled through American investment banks. German factories reopened, wages rose, unemployment fell sharply, industrial output increased by 50% in 5 years. The period became known as the Golden Twenties, and Germany paid its reparations. France and Britain received the payments. France and Britain used those payments to settle their own war debts. To the United States. The United States collected on loans it had made to the Allies during the war. It was a perfect circle. American money went to Germany. Germany sent it to Paris and London. Paris and London sent it back to New York. The money never truly left the banking system. It simply rotated and generated interest at every turn. German municipal governments borrowed. German state railways borrowed. German industrial conglomerates borrowed. By 1928, Germany was the world's second largest debtor nation. It owed more per capita than any comparable economy, and it owed it almost entirely to American investors, who expected their 7%. Every year, without interruption. Here is what the history books leave out. The man appointed to supervise all reparation payments under the Dawes Plan was Seymour Parker Gilbert. His title was Agent General for Reparations. He was responsible for ensuring Germany's payments flowed correctly to the Allied governments. He was also, and this is documented, closely associated with J.P. Morgan and Company, the same institution that had underwritten the German bond issues. The firm that sold the bonds was supervising where the money went. This was not hidden. It was simply not discussed. Gilbert served as Agent General from 1924 to 1930. In 1927, he filed formal reports warning that Germany was borrowing beyond its capacity, that the volume of American loans was unsustainable, that Germany was spending borrowed money on consumption, not investment, that when the loans stopped, the payments would stop with them. He was not wrong, but the bonds continued to be issued. Wall Street's appetite for 7% German paper had not diminished, and profitable markets have their own momentum. By 1929, the architecture had a second layer added. Owen Young led a new international committee to renegotiate the reparations once more. Young was chairman of the board of General Electric and a prominent American corporate figure. The result was the Young Plan of 1929. It reduced Germany's total reparation obligation to 36 billion Reichsmarks. It extended the payment schedule to 1988, 59 years, and it created a new institution to manage the transfers. The Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, located in Basel, Switzerland, established as an international organization immune from the laws of any single country. It still exists today. The Young Plan was signed in June 1929. 4 months later, the New York Stock Exchange collapsed, and everything that had been built on American credit collapsed with it. If this version of history is new to you, this is what we do here every video. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. American banks began calling in their loans. Not next year. Now. The short-term loans to German banks and municipalities, the ones that had funded salaries, infrastructure, and industrial production, were recalled. Germany had borrowed in foreign currencies. It had to repay in foreign currencies, but its export earnings were collapsing, and its reserves were gone. The numbers tell the story. In 1929, Germany had approximately 1.3 million unemployed. By 1930, that figure had risen to 3 million. By 1932, 6 million. 1 in 3 German workers had no job. No income, no savings, nothing to lose. The Weimar Republic's government changed chancellors 5 times between 1930 and 1933. Emergency decrees replaced parliamentary legislation. The Reichstag, Germany's parliament, met fewer than 60 times in 1932. Governing by decree had replaced governing by consent. The constitutional order was dissolving, not from ideology, from insolvency. The Nazi Party had received 2.6% of the German vote in the 1928 elections. 11 months after the Wall Street crash, they received 18.3%. By July 1932, they had 37.4%, the largest share held by any single party in the Reichstag at any point in the Weimar period. Hitler told a Munich audience in 1933, "We are the result of the distress for which the others are responsible." He was not entirely wrong. Consider the architecture. The Dawes Plan replaced military enforcement of reparations with financial enforcement. France could no longer send soldiers into the Ruhr. Instead, American credit would keep Germany paying. It succeeded for 5 years, but the mechanism required a continuous flow of American capital. Remove that flow, as happened in October 1929, and the structure inverted. The same financial channels that had stabilized the Weimar Republic now accelerated its collapse. The Dawes Plan did not intend to create Hitler. Charles Dawes was not scheming to destabilize Germany. The Nobel Committee was not wrong to award the Peace Prize. But a financial system built on permanent American credit had no contingency for failure. When the credit stopped, nothing else remained. The failure was catastrophic, and the catastrophe had a name. Let us step back and look at what we actually know. In 1924, an American banker designed a reparations plan for Germany. J.P. Morgan floated 800 million marks in bonds on the American market. A J.P. Morgan associate supervised the flow of German reparation payments. Between 1924 and 1929, approximately 30 billion marks in foreign loans flowed into Germany. When American banks withdrew that capital in 1929, German unemployment rose from 1.3 million to 6 million in 3 years. The Nazi Party went from 2.6% to 37.4% of the national vote. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933. The Second World War began on September 1st, 1939. The war killed between 70 and 85 million people. This is not a chain of coincidences. It is a chain of financial decisions, each one rational in isolation, catastrophic in sequence. I want to be precise here. This is an analysis of financial systems and institutional design, not an indictment of any individual, group, ethnicity, or nation. The economists who designed the Dawes Plan were attempting to solve a genuine crisis. They solved it, and in solving it, they created a dependency so complete that when the underlying credit evaporated, nothing else remained. History does not need conspiracy theories to be disturbing. The documented record is disturbing enough. The pattern has not disappeared. The International Monetary Fund's structural adjustment programs of the 1980s and 1990s followed a similar logic. Loans conditional on policy changes. Withdrawal of capital when conditions were not met. Argentina 1998, Indonesia 1997, Greece 2010. In each case, The withdrawal of external credit produced mass unemployment and political collapse. The mechanism is not identical, but the architecture rhymes. The financial system designed in Paris in 1924 was meant to prevent another war. It created the conditions for the most destructive war in human history. The lesson was not learned, because the lesson was not taught. Until now, the verdict on the Dawes Plan. The bankers who designed Germany's debt structure in 1924 were not planning a war. They were managing a financial crisis with the tools available to them. But they built a system that could only survive as long as American credit kept flowing. When it stopped, 6 million Germans lost their jobs. And the man who promised to restore their dignity got 37% of the vote. The peace plan was real, the Nobel Prize was earned, and the road to the Second World War was paved with the same financial instruments. Next, we are looking at the Bank for International Settlements. The institution created in 1930 to manage German reparations. The same institution that, 3 years later, transferred gold to Nazi Germany, while the war was already happening, and was never held accountable. If you made it this far, you already know more than most. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.